Now, I just found out an obscure clue hinting that Cardano might explode to $2.30, and I'm still kind of picking my jaw up off of the floor. It was about 2 a.m. The house was quiet, and there I was kind of staring at a chart and suggested that ADA could do the unthinkable. I mean, could Cardano really be gearing up for a massive move? Now, my late night curiosity was officially piqued, so here is the scene. Right, I'm winding down for the night when a friend shoots me a text. Dude, check ADA right now. Honestly, I thought he was either crazy or just pulling a prank. Cardano making a big move at 2 in the morning. Yeah, right. But curiosity got the better of me, so I fired up my laptop, opened up the chart, and I nearly do a spit take with my coffee. I see this pattern on the chart that I haven't seen play out in ages. My heart's pounding as I kind of zoom in. On this chart. Could Cardano really be setting up for a massive breakout? Or, am I just dreaming, right? I'm not talking a little 5% pump, right? We're talking potentially doubling in price, nor more, in fact, right? At first, I'm kind of just like, nah, this has got to be a mistake. Or maybe I just need some sleep. But the more that I looked, the more that I started to actually make sense of it all. And that is when I knew that I wasn't going to be getting any more sleep anytime soon. So, with that said, we've been around the kind of crypto block a fair few times. I've ridden the wild Cardano roller coaster when ADA shot up to $3 in 2021's hype. And I painfully rode it back down through the long crypto winter that followed. Now, if you were there, then you know exactly the roller coaster that I'm talking about. If you're not, well, picture the most insane theme park ride, but with your money on the line. Not exactly fun on the way down, is it, right? So I've learned to be skeptical, right? When someone suddenly yells moon out of absolutely nowhere. But that is when I saw that on the chart had my kind of inner skeptic and my inner fanboy in a bit of a heated debate. On one hand, I'm thinking there's no way that this coin's been kind of sleepy for such a long time. And on the other hand, I'm seeing signs, of it waking up, like a volcano that's about to erupt. So yeah, there's triggers, right? And what is the trigger? It's a simple, powerful chart pattern that every technical analyst and their mother loves to spot. It's called the falling wedge. So let me break this down, this falling wedge pattern, in plain English, because it's at least it's key to the why, I should say, people are actually suddenly buzzing about this $2.30 ADA potential. So imagine the price is kind of like bouncing, it's a bouncy ball, trapped inside a hallway that's gradually narrowing as it goes, right? Each bounce, the ball hits the ceiling, right? That's a little bit lower than the last bounce. And the floor, as it hits it, is also a little bit lower than the last, right? That is the falling wedge pattern in a nutshell, right? Those walls are closing in and they are the trend lines on the chart. Now, it's basically a series of lower highs and lower lows squeezing together, right? Building up pressure a bit like spring being coiled, right? Tighter and tighter. Eventually, that spring can snap upwards, and guess what? Cardano's price may have just snapped. Now, on the weekly chart, so a kind of big picture view of the price, ADA has been stuck in one of these kind of wedges since, well, late last year, right? On the top of the wedge started at around $1.34 back in December of 2024, back when everyone thought the good times were returning for crypto. From what is that point of view, it was kind of like ADA got stuck on a kind of water slide that just kept going down and down. And the only tiny little bumps upwards were here and there, but overall, it was a clear downtrend tunnel, right? Each attempt to kind of pierce the price higher made the price kind of, get rejected, and it just got smacked back down off of the ceiling by that sloping little ceiling of the wedge, right? Now, if you kind of drew two lines on ADA's price over the months, it would look like a giant funnel, basically pointing downwards, right? Getting tighter and tighter. Kind of depressing, I know. But here is the thing, right? About falling wedges anyway. They often end with a reversal to the upside. It's kind of like the price finally, says enough of this downtrend and bursts out of the funnel. And just recently, ADA did something that caught a lot of eyes. It poked its head out of that tunnel. Specifically, it pushed to roughly 96 cents, breaking through the upper trend line of the wedge, right? That is something that I remember kind of squinting at my screen thinking, is this for real? Because a breakout from a falling wedge on a weekly chart is a pretty big deal in technical analysis land. It's one of those moments that traders on crypto Twitter celebrate with rocket emojis and gifs of champagne popping. But I needed more evidence then, right? One breakout can always be a bit of a fake out, right? Well, here's the cool part. This move came with some muscle behind it, noticeably as ADA kind of pushed up, we saw an increase in the trading volume as it went for 96 cents, right? And volume is kind of like the, I guess, crowd cheering from the sidelines. When you see, above average volume on a breakout rally, it's kind of like the market's way of saying, yeah, a lot of people, see potential here. Now, getting attacked by bugs, but so yeah, a lot of people, they see potential in that particular move, right? And they're basically waiting for it. This isn't just a kind of quiet slip, above the line. It's a clear breakout with conviction then, right? So my chart wasn't just showing a random line crossing, it was actually telling me a bit of a story. The ADA is breaking free after months of being squeezed, and a whole bunch of traders are jumping in on it, at least to kind of ride it to the upside. Now, at that point, I'm sitting there with my eyes wide open thinking, okay, ADA, you have my attention then. How far can this go? And this is where that magical $2.30 number comes into play. See, chart patterns, they often give you a bit of a kind of map of kind of at least to guess how far the price might travel if the breakout holds. Now here, right, for the kind of falling wedge, one common method, the so-called measured move. Basically, you measure the kind of height of the wedge to the distance between the highest high and at least the start of the wedge and the lowest low of the wedge, at least inside the wedge. That is when you kind of project the distance upwards from the breakout point. Now, think of it like this. If the price was compressed by, let's say, $1 while inside the wedge, then it finally kind of bursts out. It could spring up roughly to that dollar level. In Cardano's case, the high of the start of the wedge is around $1.34, that December 2024 peak. And the lowest point in that wedge was somewhere around 40 cents earlier in the year. Yeah, ADA actually dipped to 40 cents during that brutal dip earlier in 2025, right? Blink and you probably missed it, but it happened, right? And that's almost a $1 drop from the high to the low. Now, if you swing that distance the other way, at least from the kind of breakout at around 96 cents, you can land roughly at the ballpark figure of $2.30, give or take a few cents. And wouldn't you know it, the analyst who, actually first flagged this wedge setup, the smart trader kind of guy by the nickname 𝗗𝗶𝘀𝗱𝗱, pinpointed a target zone of about $2.28 to $2.32. Now, when I saw that, I kind of got the chills. It's kind of like one thing for me to kind of doodle lines on my charts at 2 a.m. in the morning to dream about $2 ADA, and it's another to see a credible analyst predicting, at least publicly, I guess, laying out essentially the same target ranges. It was kind of a moment, like this might actually happen, or might actually have legs. Now, 𝗗𝗶𝘀𝗱𝗱 mentions something like 90 to 100% potential gains from the breakout point. And get this, right? He, at least if momentum really does hold strong, right? The full theoretical move from the very bottom of the wedge to that target top is actually more like 145%. That means that if you bought ADA at around 90 cents, it might actually go up to around 145% from there. And you'd think that that's roughly $2.30 to, or $2.20 to $2.40. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, Cardano at $2 again. Is this real life, or is this just hopium-filled dreams? Maybe a little bit of both, right? Because wouldn't that just be huge, right? Because it was just fantastic. ADA hasn't seen north of $2 in a long time. Now, for context, the last time Cardano was above $2 was actually back in the tail end of 2021's bull run. So a move to those levels would actually be a big deal for a lot of traders. Now, before we all start seeing dollar signs and planning our Lambo purchases, let's sprinkle in some reality. Even the most optimistic chart patterns and signals don't mean straight up lines, right? The path to $2.30, if it happens, likely won't be smooth. There are going to have to be pit stops and hurdles along the way. In ADA's case, it's actually truly en route, if it is truly en route upwards, it's likely to be a battle through a few different key levels first. So picture a video game where you have to beat several mid-level bosses before actually facing the final boss. Cardano's boss level on the kind of way up, it could be around $1.20, $1.80, $1.50, these kind of things. Those are areas where the price might stall or even pull back a little bit, because history loves those levels and how they have been trouble spots in the past. Lots of people start making, or they start taking profits there, or automated sell orders could be waiting, for example, right? $1.20 is a level where, let's say in the past, ADA has struggled. It's got a kind of psychological and technical barrier then. And if the price gets there, people, some people anyway, who, bought at the lower lows, lower prices might go, all right, it's time to take some profits here. And if ADA powers through all of that, then $1.50 is the next level, and then $1.80. So each of these is kind of like a checkpoint where the rally might actually catch its breath or even get knocked back temporarily. It's not, let's not forget that the crypto market doesn't exist in a vacuum either. So if Bitcoin sneezes, altcoins can catch a cold. So if the broader, market suddenly turns sour, that could definitely slow things down or derail ADA's fun. Also, and I can't stress this enough, there's a big cautious flag in here and all of this, right? If ADA were to kind of slip back below that wedge line that it just broke out of and essentially close, a week, it closes a week back inside, the wedge, well, that could actually spoil the entire party. It would be like the price saying that, oops, false alarm, I'm not ready just yet. And a lot of traders would see that as a failed breakout, lose confidence and possibly start selling, which could push the price down even further. Now, we've seen fake outs before, right, where a price briefly pops out of a pattern and only to fall back in, where then drops even further. Crypto markets can be sneaky just like that, so they do love to shake out the impatient and the over-eager. So while I'm optimistic right now, I've also got one eye on the possibilities, right? At least in plain English and in plain terms, if Cardano dives back under 90 cents and stays there for a weekly close, well, that bullish setup weakens significantly. And it could mean more sideways grind or even further downside before another attempt of a breakout. So yeah, I'm excited, but I'm also on guard, right? Now, at this point, in my late night analysis here, part of me is already kind of fantasizing about ADA cruising to $2.30 and beyond. I'm messaging my buddies like, yo, if this holds, we might be in for a wild ride. I'm double checking how much ADA I have, maybe even calculating what a 100 and 145% gain would do to my portfolio. But hey, we are only human, right? I'll admit, right, at least the thought of it has crossed my mind. Should I buy more right now or not, right? I actually kind of opened up my Kraken app. Full disclosure, I have an affiliate link for Kraken, which helps support the channel if you happen to use it. And I hovered over the buy button. The FOMO, the fear of missing out, was real for just a second there, right? But then I took a deep breath and reminded myself to do at least one of my personal kind of rules here, right? Don't make big moves, when you're feeling overly emotional. Whether that's kind of greedy or whether you're scared, it's late and I'm hyped on adrenaline and caffeine, right? And that's not the best state to be making financial decisions. So I did not ape on in with my life savings or anything crazy. I stuck to my plan instead of letting late night hype-driven me off of a cliff, right? That said, I'd be lying if I said I didn't buy any, right? I did treat myself to a little extra ADA just as a nibble, because sometimes your gut tells you that you need to get a taste. But I did with it with a kind of tight stop loss and in a place that, you know, I don't mind and I'm comfortable with, right? No matter how good something it looks, you know, I always kind of try to respect the risk. Now, this one might just shock you, but I'm not a financial advisor, and nothing in this video is financial advice. Cryptocurrencies are highly volatile, and you could lose all of the money that you invest. It's important that you do your own research and consult your qualified professional. After all, your investments are entirely your responsibility, and you should know that nothing is ever guaranteed when it comes to investing. Neither I, this channel, nor YouTube are liable for any losses, and this video today is for entertainment and educational purposes only. All right, now that we've got that out of the way, that important disclaimer, you know, the one that was eventually going to happen, let's get back to the excitement, because, you know, the story doesn't end with just one chart pattern or one analyst's take, right? I hopped into our community's Discord server to see what other Cardano people were saying, and man, right, the reactions that I saw were all over the place. Some people are basically popping champagne in advance, basically filling the chat with rocket emojis and ADA to the moon. Chance, you know, already kind of mentally spending their fortune and future gains, right? You know the type. Pure hype, full send, let's go, right? Others were, you know, more cautiously optimistic, saying things like, okay, this looks good, but maybe we'll get a pullback to 90 cents or 85 cents. I'd buy that dip. And of course, you can have the skeptics chiming in too. Cardano's gonna Cardano, right? I believe it when I see it, $2 ADA, literally, right? And wake me up when ADA is, you know, at $3 again, which kind of gave me a good old chuckle, right? I totally get their sides of things here. Now, Cardano has a weird way of dividing opinions, right? It's kind of the crypto equivalent of pineapple on pizza. Some people love it with passion, and others kind of just roll their eyes at it. But you gotta love it or you're gonna hate it. You can't ignore it either way when something like this wedge breakout happens on the charts. It's a signal that makes even the haters peek over the fence for just a moment. You know the kind. Now, beyond just kind of what I think, maybe even what my buddies think, I start looking at what other analysts and traders are talking about, possibly even smarter people, or even at least more objective maybe than my sleep-deprived self. Now, they're saying things like this, right? One analyst goes by the name of 𝗗𝗶𝘀𝗰𝗍. Yes, that's a Game of Thrones ice zombie. Crypto analysts love their nicknames, I swear. But 𝗗𝗶𝘀𝗰𝗍 actually sees the recent little pullback around kind of 96 cents down to, you know, around 90 cents as a positive thing, right? His view is something like, hey, as long as ADA doesn't tumble back to 77 cents, any dip from here is a chance for people to buy the dip before the next leg up. In other words, it's a healthy correction as long as we hold, you know, above the key supports. Now, I looked at where 77 cents lies on the charts. It's indeed a pretty important level historically. So if you zoom out and you can see around 77 cents, Cardano found support in the past. Buyers stepped in there. So maybe it's a big psychological level, or perhaps some large buyers have some orders around there. Whatever the reason, it's been a line in the sand. Now, 𝗗𝗗𝗀𝗋𝗋 basically identified 77 cents as the must-hold level to keep this breakout story intact. Now, 𝗗𝗗𝗋𝗋𝗋 went on to predict that if ADA can stay above that area, 77 cents, you know, we could see approach roughly around $1.80 in the coming weeks. He even pointed out the specific kind of target zone of around $1.80 to $1.88, which interestingly lines up with those kind of boss level resistance levels that we mentioned earlier, right? The ones around $1.80. Now, if ADA were to kind of move from the current 95 cents area to about $1.80, that would be a near 90% gain. Nothing to sneeze at, right? That kind of move is a matter of weeks, you know, would definitely get crypto crowds' attention, and likely trigger a whole lot of memes on crypto Twitter. But there's always a but, right? If ADA were to kind of sink below 77 cents and stay below it, then 𝗗𝗗𝗋𝗋𝗋's bullish outlook, you know, just kind of goes out of the window. It's kind of like he warned that in that bearish scenario, Cardano could slide down to 62 cents. And nobody in the ADA camp wants to see that, trust me, right? 62 cents would be a serious gut punch, and it could basically erase a lot of the progress that ADA has made recently and put us back in the kind of dreary kind of lows. It would also kind of be pretty much inevitable, or at least invalidate, I should say, the kind of whole falling wedge breakout idea, you know, at least for a while, right? Because if it does drop that far, you're definitely back inside the wedge, or worse, you're heard his analysis. It reinforces that crucial 77-cent support level. I know, right? It's kind of like watching that level like a hawk. And in my mind, all right, if ADA starts dropping, let's see if it bounces at 77 cents. If it doesn't, well, it might be time to put the champagne back in the fridge. Now, while White Walker is looking at the bigger picture for weeks ahead, other analysts with equally exciting and excellent nicknames, Mr. Banana, yeah, I honestly, Mr. Banana is zeroed in on the right now, right? He's looking at the short term and the immediate short term action as well. So Mr. Banana popped up on my feed calling ADA's recent move a nice bounce, as in the price was just hovering around 96 cents. And looking at the 4-hour candle, so zoomed in on the past couple of weeks of price action. Now on the chart, he pointed out that something pretty textbook. ADA managed to break through a resistance level at around 85 to 86 cents. And once it did it, that area turned into support for around about 90 cents. So in plain terms, what was a ceiling became a floor, and exactly what bulls want to see before a bit of a breakout. It means that buyers are now willing to step on in at higher prices where previous sellers were, and at least they were dominating, right? Now, he also noted that trading volumes were rising on these shorter time frames as well as the RSI, the relative strength index, which was recovering from a dip. So when the RSI ticks back up like it has, it actually suggests that the assets went from an oversold state to start gaining strength. Basically, buyers are starting to overweigh the sellers. Combine a rising RSI with increased volume, and you've got a decent recipe for a continued short-term uptrend. Now, Mr. Banana, I can't believe I'm saying that, thinks that this is a mini uptrend, and if it holds, right, it's going to be good. ADA could soon test out that 98 cents to $1 range once again, at least in the short term, basically knocking on the door of $1. Now, $1 might not sound as thrilling as $2 or $3, but psychologically, $1 is a huge deal for any asset that's been below a buck for a while. Now, those round numbers tend to carry a lot of weight. A kind of break above $1 could be a symbolic, right? If break above it, it could actually might draw more momentum and more traders. But simply because, hey, ADA's now back above $1. Now I remember, right, how much of a battle it was for Cardano to break $1 back in 2021. But once it kind of did it, that's kind of when it really did take off, right? History could actually rhyme right here. And if ADA firmly clears $1, it could actually open the floodgates for a much, much bigger move with, a caveat of those boss levels of $1.20, $1.50, $1.80 that I've spoken about already. So Mr. Banana's short-term analysis is kind of feeding into the larger narrative. Step one of maybe multiple steps, right? Step one, kind of get to $1. Step two, if momentum continues, start tracking and tackling those higher levels. Each step builds confidence for the next one. So at this point, I'm basically gathering up all of these analysis, these tidbits, and I'm kind of like a crypto scavenger hunt, if you will, right? Each piece, kind of comes together. The wedge breakout, the White Walker's support levels, Mr. Banana's short-term bounce. Together, they paint a picture that Cardano might actually be, under, at least have some kind of fire underneath it, right? Ready to ignite. Now, my late night research session has turned into a whole detective case here, connecting clues, right, from different sources, and all signs were pointing to something big brewing. But hold on, we're not done, right? Because the crypto world loves nothing more than bold predictions. And oh boy, there are some pretty bold predictions about Cardano flying around right now. So let's talk about the forecast from an analyst nicknamed 𝗗𝗶𝘀𝗰𝗍𝗍. Now, not long ago, 𝗗𝗶𝘀𝗍𝗍 went on record with something pretty wild. Right? He said that Cardano could rally towards $3 in the next 27 days. 27 days. That's oddly specific, right? And an aggressive timeline for the latest kind of rally, right? Now, the reason behind this call is the classic golden cross pattern forming on ADA's chart. Here's a quick recap for those who aren't chart nerds. A golden cross is usually a shorter term moving average, typically the 50-day MA, crossing above the longer term moving average, typically the 200 EMA. And it's kind of considered a big bullish signal, a sign of a longer term momentum shifting upwards, and traders get all giddy when they spot one. Now, basically, it's because history, a golden cross, has often kind of preceded a significant uptrend, though, like everything, it's not guaranteed. Now, 𝗗𝗶𝘀𝗍𝗍 wasn't just making a blind prediction here. He actually backed it up by pointing to history. He noted that the last time Cardano flashed a golden cross was actually in December of 2024. And after that, what happened? Well, ADA's price rocketed from under 40 cents to $1.40 in a matter of weeks. Now that could, be massive, right? For us, it could actually be about a 237% surge. Basically, if you had bought at 40 cents and held it until 140, well, you would have more than tripled your money. Right? That's not too bad or too shabby, right? Now, his thinking is that we already have a similar golden cross setup in mid-2025. So maybe we get a similar explosive move, right? If ADA is around 90 cents to $1 and you get another 200% rally, well, you can do the math. We're talking near $3. The same insane, right, kind of growth. I mean, triple the price in under a month, right? But then again, right, crypto can be pretty insane. I remember back in 2020 when people were on forums saying that Cardano to $3, and a lot of others just simply laughed, right? Thinking that this was ridiculous. And then in less than a year, it actually hit $3, an all-time high of around $3.09 in September of 2021. So I've learned never say never in crypto. Right? Things can seem improbable, can actually sometimes suddenly become reality when FOMO kicks in and the stars align. Now, speaking of that all-time high around $3.09, there's another respected voice chiming in. This is Dan from Crypto Capital Ventures, right? And if you follow Cardano news on YouTube or on Twitter, you've probably come across this guy before. Now, he's a well-known Cardano permable, if you will, and content creator, I guess, is a good term for him, right? He's kind of been covering ADA for a little while now. Now, Dan also kind of projecting that ADA could climb to around $3 again, but he's been wrong in the past. I should point out that he was expecting, I think it was $7 to $10 by the end of January. So we'll take it with a pinch of salt. But let's go into his reasoning behind this move then. Now, he pointed out that ADA has broken above a long-term descending trend line, basically a line of resistance that has been kind of pushing the price down for a long time. Think years. Now, breaking that is a pretty big deal on the technical level. It's kind of like finally cracking through a ceiling that's kind of kept you in the basement. On top of that, Dan tracks something that he calls the risk score for ADA, likely a metric of kind of how overbought or oversold ADA is relative to its history then. And ADA is actually, noted that ADA is a risk score around 44, which is notable because 44 was the risk score level in December of 2020, right before Cardano began its enormous rally that took it to an all-time high, now of at least $3.09 by late 2021. So in other words, the last time that ADA was in this kind of risk zone, an epic bull rally followed. Dan's basically just saying the conditions now look eerily similar to how they were before. So it could be the start of a huge rally. Connect the dots is what he's saying. Now, when I heard Dan's analysis, I honestly kind of took a step back and, didn't really think terribly too much of it. But, it is what it is. It's another analyst kind of predicting some crazy numbers. Now, by now, you probably can tell that I'm all hyped about all this stuff. I mean, I started the night kind of skeptical and half asleep, and now I'm wide awake and excited. But I'm also trying to keep my feet on the ground, right? For every time I have a Dan, claiming we're going to the moon, there's also someone else saying that you've got to kind of don't count your chickens until they've hatched kind of thing. So it's important to kind of keep an eye on all that stuff. Now, you remember those kind of count this posts on, I guess X and tweets and all that kind of stuff of this is your last chance to buy ADA under $1 that kind of kept on coming and coming. And, ADA would just drop to 80 cents and 70 cents and 60 cents. Yeah, right. It's kind of like that, right, with a lot of this stuff. You've got to take it with a pinch of salt. So here's where I'm at personally, right? I do hold ADA. I've been holding ADA through the ups and the downs. And if this breakout continues to show strength, then I might add a little bit more to my stack in a decent pullback, or I might retest the levels. Like ADA's dips to, let's say, 90 cents, 80 cents, or whatever, 77 cents, then I could accumulate a bit more from there. All of those spots that I would consider, right? Now, I think it's important to kind of consider, the emotional angle here, because it's a bit of a tug of war, right? FOMO versus patience. There's a voice in my head that's going, if you don't load up now, you're going to kick yourself if it zooms to $2, as you know that it might happen. And then there's the other voice, right, which is chill. If it's really going to go to $2 or $3, there's plenty of upside ahead. And that's if it fails, you'd be glad you didn't throw everything all in at once. So investing is kind of weird like that, right? As much as you kind of manage your own emotions, it's all about riding out your emotions and reading the charts or doing the research, right? It's all a combination of it all. I also can't help but think about the bigger picture for Cardano, right? This isn't just about charts and price targets. Cardano's project is with a massive community, right? These people have, and maybe even you're one of them, right, have been kind of waiting a rather long time for Cardano's potential to see this kind of rally, right? Whether it's more adoption or smart contracts or DeFi, new partnerships, scaling solutions, Hydra, Midnight, and so much more, right? Bear markets are for building, they would say. And Cardano has indeed been building in the background during the quieter times. So if ADA's price is starting to pick up now, it could actually reignite a lot of interest in the ecosystem itself. More developers might actually hop on to build more projects on Cardano, more users would be drawn to Cardano to try it out, or at least the Cardano-based applications. So success can be, an avalanche of progress everywhere that can drive it like a flywheel. Now, there's a lot going on with all of this stuff, but I think for the most part, my takeaway, at least for me, is kind of like feeling like being on the cusp of something and not actually wanting to kind of blink, or you might miss it. Now, Cardano might be gearing up for a major breakout towards $2.30 or beyond. We've got multiple pieces of evidence: the falling wedge, the breakout of the volume, the golden cross, the long-term trend lines, the analysts with cool nicknames, if you want to say that, right, independently pointing to bullish scenarios, and a community that's coming alive with excitement, right? But as a hype man, as I am, right, or at least as hyped as I am, I should say, I know that nothing is guaranteed, right? We have to have our checklist of things that we want to see, right? ADA holding above key support levels like 77 cents, breaking above $1 with confidence, and then taking out these kind of mid-level resistance bosses at $1.20, $1.50, $1.80 on the way up. If those things happen, then yeah, we might be looking at a fantastic whole new chapter for Cardano holders. Now, I'm going to be watching. I'm going to let it all play out with popcorn in hand, maybe coffee, and who am I kidding? Of course it's going to be coffee, always coffee. And hey, if you do see ADA's price going to $3, and I want to hear from you guys down in the Discord server. So for now, guys, why don't you hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you all in the next one.